Welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Good to be with you, Chris.
I want to start with the deal that shook Washington. President Trump siding with Pelosi and Schumer over his own Republican leaders, over his own Treasury Secretary in his effort to link Harvey disaster relief funding to a three-month extension, of government funding and the debt limit, and even talking about a deal on DACA. Here's the president on Air Force One.
Chuck and Nancy would like to see something happen, and so do I. And I said, if we can get something to happen, we're going to sign it, and we're going to make a lot of happy people.
Congressman, are you one of those happy people?
No, I don't think this was a good deal for the American taxpayer. We didn't do anything to address the underlying $20 trillion debt problem. But frankly, what options did the president have in front of him? The first time the Republican conference talked about the debt ceiling was Wednesday morning. And the Freedom Caucus, we had called for 9.5 weeks ago, Chris. We did a press conference and we said, don't leave town until you actually have a plan on the debt ceiling and outline the tax reform plan that we're going to do, and until we deal with health care. And instead, we went home for the longest August recess in a non-election year, longest break in a non-election year for more than the last decade. So the break was even longer than some breaks you have in an election year. And you know how politicians like to be home in election time. So that was the problem. We should have stayed here and put together a plan. We offered ideas in the Freedom Caucus. I said, let's cap spending as a percentage of GDP, and I'll raise the debt ceiling. So the problem here is we didn't address the underlying problem. The problem wasn't a 3-month, 6-month time frame. You know, I learned a long time ago that when you fail to prepare, you get a bad outcome. Well, and that's what happened here.
There are two issues. One is your concern, and the concern of a lot of conservatives, that you didn't get anything in return for raising the debt limit, that you didn't get
almost every other time you raise a debt limit.
Didn't get spending cuts. There's another issue, and that is the significance of giving Schumer and Pelosi all this leverage when the issue comes up again in the case of government funding in December and maybe shortly thereafter on the debt limit. And the question I have for you, giving the Democrats, the Democratic leadership, more leverage, is that good or bad for the Trump agenda when it comes to tax cuts and immigration and Obamacare?
I don't look at it in that light. I look at it as a good or bad for the American people. You know, I say this all the time. Our job is pretty basic. What do we tell the American people we're going to do at election time? What did they elect us here, send us here to accomplish? Let's focus on that. So I don't think it's good for the American taxpayer. I don't think it's good for the American people. That, to me, is the focus.
Why isn't it good?
Well, when you just raise the debt ceiling and don't do anything to address the underlying problem, I mean, this is like your kid at college who's got your credit card and he's spending more than he takes in and he's already piled up a lot of debt, and he gets to say, oh, for the next 3 months, I got unlimited borrowing authority. I think if that was your son or my son, we'd have a problem with that. That's what this deal in essence did. So that's why it's not good for the taxpayer.
The fact that you're giving the Democrats another bite at the apple on all those issues in December.
Chris, I'm an American. You have to be an optimist. So I look at it this way. We get another bite at the apple. We're going to put forward a plan that says, let's cap spending. This is where the Freedom Caucus, we took a position. Let's cap spending as a percentage of GDP. Let's bring spending back down to its modern times historic norm below 20% of gross domestic product. And then let's get this economy growing. I do agree with the president. We need to go focus on tax cuts. We need that because that's going to give us the kind of growth we need to deal with a $20 trillion debt burden. But I look at this as an optimistic from the Republican side as well. We have a chance now to put together a plan, take that case to the American people early, not wait till the last minute like we did before, and sell that plan to the American people and pass that.
But what do you think of the idea of this alliance between the president and, as he calls them, Chuck and Nancy? Are you concerned about the possibility that he might go with them?
I think the president is focused on doing what he told the American people he was going to do: cutting their taxes, building a border security wall, dealing with Obamacare, all those issues.
But Chuck and Nancy,
Michigan,
but Chuck and Nancy are against repealing Obamacare. Chuck and Nancy are against funding for the wall. Chuck and Nancy have a very different idea of tax cuts than the president does and you do.
I know, and that's why we got to get our plan out there and push it early and take the case to the American people. And I think if we do that, we can win. I think this was a unique situation where, unfortunately, there wasn't any good options presented to the. You know, I learned a long time. My background's a sport of wrestling. You don't prepare. You don't do the preparation and go to. We didn't even have a practice to figure out what we were going to do to give a good plan to the president. So that's the problem. I think this is a unique situation, not what's going to happen in the future. What's going to happen in the future, I think, with this president and certainly with us conservatives in the House, is we're solely and totally focused on what the American people elected us to do.
I just want to press this one more time, because there were always doubts about whether or not this president was a true conservative. You heard it from a lot of folks on the right, members of the Freedom Caucus. Do you worry that he may be more interested now in scoring victories than he is in pushing a true conservative agenda?
What I worry about is, I hate to keep saying it, but it's what drives our mission statement, the Freedom Caucus, is the countless number of people who feel like this town's forgotten them. Our job is to remember them and fight for them. I think President Trump has that same vision, that same focus. In this situation, he wasn't presented with good options. He does want to get focused on tax reform. I get all that. So we got to make sure we push forward the things the American people elect us to do, give those options to the president, and I'm confident when that happens, he will pick those options that are conservative and are consistent with what the American people elected us to accomplish.
Given what you've just said, do you have full confidence in House Speaker Paul Ryan?
Yeah, no one's, I mean, there's these stories that, what one story said, Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan met with the Speaker. I mean, well, that's hardly news. We meet with the Speaker every single week. No one's talking about changing in leadership. What we're talking about is just what I said. What was the agenda the American people voted for on November 8th? Let's get that done.
But you say there's no interest in changing the Speaker, and I'm not pushing you to do so, but you're saying you offered ideas. You wanted to stay in session in August to come up with a solid, serious plan to tie raising the debt limit to spending cuts.
Yep.
The House and Senate leadership of your party didn't come up with that.
Right, and that was a mistake. We should have stayed. I think in hindsight, I think well, it wasn't ours because we called for staying.
So
we were willing to stay. Well, you know, leadership makes the schedule, not Jim Jordan. So we should have stayed here. I think if you ask the American people, should we stay here and get done what you sent us here to get done? I think they would overwhelmingly say, well, heck yes, you should. And the fact that you didn't, again, the longest non-election year break in over a decade. That's really what we're supposed to be doing when we're trying to get these critical things done at a time when we got a $20 trillion debt, at a time when our border security is not where it needs to be. According to, I mean, that's the kind of thing we got to focus on.
On Friday, Treasury Secretary, this is before you guys took the vote, and you were one of the 90 Republicans who voted against the whole package. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and the budget chief, Mick Mulvaney, came to meet with House Republicans to try to get you to pass the Harvey package. A couple of questions I want to ask you. Widely reported, is it true that Mnuchin asked the caucus to pass the debt limit for him?
I don't recall it being framed that way. I do recall them making a strong case for us to vote for it. Of course, there was pushback from members, like you would expect, because when you have a $20 trillion problem, you probably shouldn't just allow unlimited borrowing authority for the federal government for the next 3 months without doing anything to address the $20 trillion problem. Now, to me, that is just common sense. But again, that's where we wound up. They were pushing for it, and 90 of us said this is not a good deal for the American taxpayer.
Well, that brings me to my final question. Mick Mulvaney, who used to be a member of the House Freedom Caucus, a budget hawk, I see the smile on your face, used to be, he wouldn't commit, as I understand it, that when the debt limit comes up again in December or shortly thereafter, that you will tie it to spending cuts. And I want to ask you about that, one. And two, the fact that the president is now talking with Chuck Schumer about doing away with any vote on the debt limit. You basically lose the opportunity to use that as a tool.
Yeah, that's a bad idea. I mean, again, go back to the example of your college son who's got the credit card. He wants to say, I want to raise the limit, Dad, and I don't even have to even talk to you about it. I think that is just particularly when you have the debt burden that we currently have. So that is a bad idea. Look, all the more reason why we need to have a plan early. I mean, this is politics. You put together your argument, your plan, and you take the case to the American people. And I'm confident if you said to the American people, we are going to raise the debt ceiling. That is important. There's the financial markets. We understand how important that is. But we are not going to do that unless we address the problem. Why don't we cap spending and get it back down to the historic levels in modern times below 20% of GDP? I think that makes a lot of sense. It's a phase down. That's the kind of approach. You take that to the case to the American people, you do it early enough, you do the preparation early enough, you can actually win the match.
Congressman Jordan, thank you.
Thank you.
And I tell you, I'm going to make sure my kids, I'm taking all their credit cards away.
Good.